I also final exam review. All right, let me let a few in real quick. And y'all, so number one, solve the equation. I got 5p minus 3 equals 1p plus 9. All right, so I'm just going to solve this for p. So the first thing we'll do is get the p's on one side by subtracting p from both sides. That's going to give me 4p minus 3. That's going to equal the right side, where the p's cancel. So all that's left is my 9. All right, so now I want the numbers to the other side. So we'll add 3 to both sides. I get 4p, that cancels, and that's going to equal 9 plus 3 is 12. And then finally, we want that to be 1p instead of 4p, so divide both sides by 4. All right, so that cancels, giving me 1p, and then 12 divided by 4 gives us 3. All right, so another one we're going to solve. Now this one says solve using the addition and subtract and multiplication principles. So let's see what we got. We got 6x minus parentheses 2x minus 1 all equal to 2. So y'all, the first thing we got to do is get rid of these parentheses. So remember, to get rid of parentheses following subtraction, you got to distribute that subtraction to both of the terms inside the parentheses. So I'm going to bring down this 6x. I'm going to treat that negative like a -1. So -1 times 2x makes that a -2x. And then a negative times a -1 makes that a +1, all equal to 2. All right, then I'm going to add like terms on the left side. So 6 minus 2 gives me 4x plus 1 equal to 2. All right, so same thing I did here. I'm going to move this number by subtracting 1 from both sides. So I get my 4x, that cancels. 2 minus 1 gives us 1. And then y'all, the same thing we did here, divide by 4 to make that a 1x. So that cancels, giving me my 1x. And then I can't do nothing with that 1/4. So I'm going to leave that as 1/4. Now, number 3, solve the inequality. Now, once I graph this, they want me to graph the solution and then write it in interval notation. So they're giving me -4x plus 6 is less than 18. So first we'll solve it, then we'll graph it, then we'll write it in interval notation. So y'all, we're solving this for the x. So first thing is to subtract 6 from both sides. So that gives me -4x. That cancels. Less than 18 minus 6 gives me 12. Now I need to make this a 1x, but remember, anytime the variable is negative and we divide by a negative number, we got to reverse the inequality. So since I'm dividing both sides by -4, this less than will now become a greater than. So remember to flip it when you divide by the negatives. All right, so that cancels, giving me my 1x greater than 12 divided by -4 gives us a -3. All right, so the first box will say the solution is, you'll put in your x is greater than -3. Now to graph the solution, so let me draw a few points on here. We'll go out -5 to the left and 5 to the right. So x greater than -3. So I come over here to -3 on the x. Now remember, since it does not have a line under that for equals, when I put my point, I need to make a hollow circle. Now, if that was the equals under here, we would make that a solid circle. But since there's no equals under it, it's an open circle. And then remember, greater than shades to the right. Now, interval notation for this answer, since there's a hollow circle there, we use parentheses at -3. And if that was solid, we'd used a bracket. Now, from -3 is greater than, goes to the right. So in interval notation, it heads towards positive infinity. So that's what we want for the interval notation, okay? Hey, y'all, moving on to number 4. Solve by elimination. So this is where I had 2 equations. So my first one is a -x plus 7y equals 15. My next equation is a -2x minus 7y equals a -33. All right, so I got to eliminate one of the variables. And if you look at this, I got a positive 7y and a -7y. When I add these equations together, the y's will cancel or be eliminated. So let's see what we get on the x's. -x, -2x gives me -3x. The y's cancel. And then a 15 and -33 give me a -18. Now we got a single variable, so we're going to solve for the x by dividing both sides by -3. So that cancels, giving me my 1x. Negative divided by negative makes that a +6. So I know the x value will be a 6. So now I got to come in and get the y value. Now remember, to get the y value, I plug the 6 in for one of these equations and solve for the y. So y'all want to use the first equation, which is a -x, which is 6. Now, be careful. Since the negative is in this equation, you got to put it in this equation when you solve for the y. Okay, plus 7y is going to equal 15. So now solve this for the y. So first thing I would do is add 6 to both sides. So that cancels. I get my 7y equals 21. And then divide both sides by 7. So that cancels, giving me my 1y. 21 divided by 7 equals 3. So remember, these got to look like a ordered pair. So the x is 6, the y is 3. All right, y'all, the next one wants me to graph 4y plus 24x equals 32. All right, so to graph this, I need to get this y by itself on the left side. So I'm going to start out by subtracting the 24x. All right, so that brings down my 4y. Those x's canceled on that side. Now, you could put 32 minus 24x, or you can put negative 24x plus 32. I usually put the x's first. So it looks like the y equals mx plus b form. All right, now, 4y needs to be 1y, so everything gets divided by 4. So remember, when you multiply or divide, you do it to everybody, okay? So those 4's cancel, giving me 1y. Negative 24 divided by 4 gives me a negative 6x plus 32 divided by 4 gives me my 8. So I've got my equation. So now I just need to graph this. So I'm just going to pick 2 x values and find the y values and plot them 2 points. So let's draw a little graph here. All right, I'm going to use 0 and 1 because they're pretty easy numbers. If I put a 0 in, negative 6 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 8 gives me an 8. If I put a 1 in, negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 8 gives me 2. All right, so let's go out. I'll go out to 10. All right, so my x and y. So my first point was 0, 8. So remember, 0's in the center. Just go up 8 and put your first point. Then I had 1, 2. So that'll be right 1 and up 2 for my second point. So I want the one with the line coming downhill like that, okay? So remember, solve it for the y, find 2 x values, get the y values, and then plot them 2 points. All right, 6 wants me to find the slope. So they're giving me 6y equals x plus 11. So remember, the slope is whatever number is in front of the x once I solve that for the y. So I got the y by itself, so I just need to divide both sides by 6 to make that a 1y. All right, so that cancels, giving me my 1y. Now remember, since there's not a number in front of that x, we treat it like a 1. So this is like a 1/6 x plus, can't do nothing with that 11 over 6. But remember, the slope is the m, and the m is whatever number's in front of that x. Remember, this is y equals mx plus b form. So since I got a 1/6 in front of my x, my slope is going to be 1/6. All right, then this one wants me to find an equation. So find the equation of a line that goes through the following pair of points. So my points are -5, -5, and -1, -21. So remember, the first thing I'm going to do to find my equation is get my slope. And I'm going to find the slope using the slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Once I get to slope, I'll then use my point slope formula. So let's see, this will be x1, y1. This will be x2, y2. So plugging in, I get negative 21 minus negative 5 over x2, which is negative 1, minus x1, which is negative 5. So I'm just using the parentheses to separate all my negatives up here. So this is like negative 21 plus 5, which will give me a negative 16. This is like negative 1 plus 5, which will give me a positive 4. And y'all simplifying that, negative 16 divided by 4 gives me a negative 4. So the slope of this line is negative 4. So now I'm going to use the point slope formula, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I'm going to plug in for the y1, the m, and the x1 and come up with my equation. All right, so let's see. Y1 was negative 5. So this is y minus negative 5 equals my m, which was negative 4, times x minus x1, which was negative 5. So this is like y plus 5 equals negative 4 times x plus 5. So I'm just making them double negatives into positives real quick. So our first step, distribute our negative 4. So I get y plus 5 equals negative 4x, and then negative 4 times 5 is a negative 20. And y'all, that step, get that y by itself by subtracting 5 from both sides. So this gives me my y, that cancels, equals negative 4x minus, so a negative 20, negative 5, give me a negative 25. Okay, so start out finding the slope and then plug that into your point slope formula. All right, y'all, this one says add or subtract. All right, so my first parentheses, negative 5a plus 7b minus c in parentheses minus second parentheses 4b plus 3c minus 7d. So subtraction is the one where we had to distribute that subtraction to everything in the second parentheses. So you're going to drop the first parentheses and leave these the same. So negative 5a plus 7b minus c. Distribute that negative. So negative times a positive makes that a negative 4b. Negative times a positive makes that a negative 3c. But then that negative times that negative makes that a positive 7d. So now we're just going to add our like terms. So look, you got a negative 5a. There's no other like terms. So the negative 5a comes down. On the b, I got 7b and a negative 4b. So 7 minus 4 gives me a positive 3b. On my c's, I got a negative c and a negative 3c. So negative 1 and negative 3 give me a negative 4c. And then y'all, all that's left, bring down the 7d. So the trick on that was getting it distributed and getting them signs right, okay? All right, y'all, let's see. Number 9, I can fit right here. This one says multiply. They're giving me 6m plus 1 squared. So remember this one, you got to write twice and FOIL. So 6m plus 1 times a 6m plus 1. And these are not conjugate pairs, so the middles don't cancel on this one, okay? So the 6m times 6m is a 36m squared. 6m times 1 is a positive 6m. Then we distribute that 1. 1 times 6m is another positive 6m. And then finally, 1 times 1 is a positive 1. So once you FOILed that out, your next step is to add the like terms in the middle. So bring down that 36m squared. 6m's plus 6m's gives us 12m. And then at the end, bring down our positive 1. So remember, the binomial squared, we write the binomial twice and FOIL this thing. Okay? All right, this one says factor by factoring out a negative GCP. I mean GCF, my bad. So we want to factor out a negative greatest common factor on this one. So no matter what, we know that we're pulling out a negative out front, okay? So I got a negative 6x to the 12th plus 12x to the 9th minus 18x to the 6th plus 24x to the 3rd. So I'm looking for my greatest common factor first. Once I get my greatest common factor, I'll factor it out and put everything else in parentheses. So the greatest common factor has to be negative because that's what they're telling us. So let's see what number we can get. I got a 6, 12, 18, 24. The greatest common factor of all 4 of those numbers is a 6. So I'm going to factor out a negative 6. And y'all, if the smallest number is a factor of all the other numbers, that smallest number automatically will become the greatest common factor. Now, when I look at the x's, the greatest common factor will be the smallest exponent. So the smallest exponent is a 3. So I'm going to be factoring out a negative 6, x to the 3rd. So remember, the greatest common factor is equal to the smallest exponent when you're looking at the variables. All right, so we'll pull out that negative 6, x to the 3rd. Everything else is going in parentheses. Well, negative 6 divided by negative 6 is 1. x12 divided by x3, subtract exponents, leaves you a x to the 9th. Then you got 12 divided by negative 6 is a negative 2. 9 minus 3 leaves me x to the 6th. Negative 18 divided by negative 6 is a positive 3. 6 minus 3 leaves me 3 x to the 3rd. And then 24 divided by negative 6 is a negative 4. 3 minus 3 is 0. So the x's cancel. And I got my final answer. Remember, they cannot have anything common inside the parentheses when you're done. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 have nothing in common. And I don't have an x behind the 4. So there's no more GCFs on the variable. All right, number 11 says the middle term of the trinomial has been rewritten. So they want me to factor by grouping. I got 15x squared plus 12x plus a 10x plus 8. So remember, grouping, I got to set this into two groups of terms, the first two and the second two. And from each of these terms, I got to factor out a greatest common factor. So let's play with the first two. 15 and 12, their greatest factor is a 3. I got an x squared and an x, so I got to factor out at least 1x. So these two divided by 3x goes into the parentheses. 15x squared divided by 3x will leave me a 5x plus 12x divided by 3x leaves a 4. So now we do that to the second two. Now remember, the second two, you got to put a sign, and the sign is equal to the sign in front of this third term. So the second GCF will be positive. And then 10 and 8, the only thing they have in common is a 2. Now remember, the parentheses got to match. So let's see. 10x divided by 2 leaves you 5x. Plus the 8 divided by 2 leaves you a 4. And y'all remember, at this point, I'm going to factor these into two parentheses. I'm going to pull out the common factor here, which is the 5x plus 4. And once you factored out the GCF from both of those, the second parentheses has what's left. Well, if I factor out a 5x plus 4 from both of those, what's left will be a 3x plus 2. So the parentheses become one of your factors. Everything else becomes the second. All right, this one says factor completely. All righty, so I got a 3x to the third plus a 3x squared minus 18x. So y'all remember, the first thing you look for is a greatest common factor. Well, this one does have a greatest common factor. All three of these numbers will divide by 3. And remember, I got an x3, x squared, and x. So I go to the smallest exponent, which is this x to the first. So my greatest common factor will be a 3x. So now, put in parentheses what each of these will give you, divided by the 3x. 3x to the third divided by 3x. 3 minus 1 leaves me an x squared. 3x squared divided by 3x. X squared divided by x leaves you 1x. And then minus 18x divided by 3x leaves me a negative 6. So then what you got to do is factor what's inside the parentheses. So bring down the 3x. And then remember, this will factor into two sets of parentheses. X squared means an x in front of both parentheses. Negative 6 means you got unlike signs. One's positive, one's negative. And then we want factors of 6 that'll subtract and give me 1. So that'll be 3 and 2. The larger number has the same sign as the middle. So my 3 will be positive. And then my 2 will be the negative. All right, 13, factor again. Factor as completely as possible. They're giving me an 18x squared minus 63x minus 36. So once again, I'm going to find the greatest common factor between an 18, 63, and 36. That greatest common factor would be a 9. Now, y'all remember, you can use that calculator like I showed you. So let me show you how to find that GCF once again real quick. So remember, I hit math, and I go down. And on here, we call it greatest common multiple. Whoops. Arrow over the number first and go to GCD, which is the same as the greatest common factor. Hit enter. You can only use 2 numbers, so I'm just going to use the 18 and the 63. And if you notice, I get my 9. So you can only do 2 numbers at once on this. So you could do the 18 and 63, 63 and 36. It don't matter. Do 2 of them numbers. I usually do the biggest number and the smallest on it. But it don't matter. So let's factor out our 9. So divide all 3 numbers by 9. You're going to get a 2x squared minus 7x minus 4. So now we got to try to factor what's left in here. So that 9 will come down, and then we're going to have 2 sets of parentheses. Now remember, to find this one, I know there will be an X in front of both of these. The last number is negative, so one of these will be positive, one of these will be negative. So to find my numbers, I'm going to multiply 2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So factors of 8 that'll subtract and get me 7 are going to be 8 and 1. Larger factor will be negative like that middle number. So it's going to be a negative 8 and a positive 1. But on this one, remember, when you had a number in front and you multiplied to get to 8, you then got to divide out that number. So divide both of these by 2. So y'all, this 9 comes down. So 1 does not divide by 2. So remember, I got to move the 2 in front of the x so that I get a 2x plus 1. Now the second one, 8 will divide by 2. So that is going to give me an x minus 4. All right, so let's see. And then that is factored completely. Now, I ain't gonna lie, some of these are a little trickier than we had in that homework, you know. So be careful on these, okay? All right, another one that says factor completely. 4x squared minus 49. So the first thing I would look for is a GCF, but y'all, these does not have a GCF. So this is what we call the difference of perfect squares. And remember, this will factor into what we call conjugate pairs. One is positive, one will be negative. In the front of each parentheses, you take the square root of the first number. Square root of 4 is 2. So that's going to give me a 2x and a 2x. Then at the back will be the square root of 49. Square root of 49 is 7. So that gives me a 7 and a 7. So remember, number 14, difference of perfect squares will factor into conjugate pairs. All righty, y'all. So moving on. What are we on? Number 15. So 15 says solve. I got a 4x squared minus 5x equals 6. So on 15, you're going to solve it by factoring. So the first thing we need is a 0 where that 6 is. Remember, I need everything on one side equal to 0. So to get a 0 here, I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. So none of these are like terms, so I'm going to put them in descending order. 4x squared minus the 5x minus the 6. These cancel, so all that's left now is my 0. All righty, so this is the one where I'm going to have to factor, and I got a number in the front that I cannot factor out. So we know we'll have an x in front of both of these. Last one's negative, so you're going to have unlike signs. And then let's find our number. 4 times 6 is 24. I want factors of 24 that'll subtract and give me 5. That's going to be 8 and 3. The larger factor 8 will have the same sign as the middle. So the 8 will be negative, 3 will be positive. And then remember, take both of them and divide by that 4. So we sort of borrowed a 4 for a little bit, but then we divide it back out, okay? So this one does not reduce, so I'm going to put the 4 in front. So I'm going to get a 4x plus 3. The second one will reduce, which will give me an x minus 2. So now that we got it factored, we're going to find those solutions by setting both of our factors equal to 0. So on the first one, you got to add 3. So you get 4x, that cancels, is going to equal 3, and then divide by 4. Well, that cancels, giving me a 1x equals 3/4. Now remember, since you had this x squared, you got to get 2 numbers. So there's one answer. And then the second answer, all I got to do is add 2 to both sides. And I get x equals a positive 2. So we got what? A positive 3/4. Whoops, right here I made a bad. Okay, that was. Ooh, I knew I should have had unlike signs. So y'all, let me fix this. I wrote down a minus. This would be 4x plus 3 equals 0. So let's fix this one because I had to actually put a minus there. So 4x plus 3 equals 0. I think I was going a little too quick. Subtract 3. We get 4x equals negative 3. And then divide by the 4. Well, that cancels, giving me my 1x equals a negative 3/4. So since the factor was positive, the answers will be negative, okay? So don't do like me and write it down wrong right here. All right, y'all, so I'm going to turn this one over. This next one's sort of big. 16 says multiply. All right, y'all, t squared plus 2t minus 8 over t squared minus 5t plus 6 times t squared plus 9t plus 18 over t squared plus 10t plus 24. So you're really not going to multiply. You're just going to factor everything and then cancel any common factors from the top with the common factor on the bottom. So all 4 of these will factor into 2 sets of parentheses. All right, so the first one, t and a t. That's negative, so I got one positive, one negative. Factors of 8 that subtract and give me 2 are going to be 4 and 2. So 4 and 2 are the factors. The 4 will be positive. The 2 will be negative. On the bottom, I got a t and a t. Last sign's positive, so both of these factors will be negative like the middle. Factors of 6 that'll add to get 5 are 3 and 2. Right up here, I got a t and a t. Last one's positive, so both of these will be positive like the middle. Factors of 18 that add to get to 9 will be 6 and 3. And then finally, the last one, t and a t. Last one's positive, so both of these will be positive like the middle. Factors of 24 that'll add to get 10 are 4 and 6. So now anything on top can cancel with anything on the bottom, it looks like. So that t plus 4 cancels with that t plus 4. Let's see, the t minus 2 cancels with a t minus 2. And y'all got one more. What is it? I got a t plus 6 cancels with a t plus 6. So our final answer on top is a t plus 3 over the bottom, which is a t minus 3. So 16 multiply is actually factor and cancel everything you can, okay? All right, 17 says add, then simplify. All righty, so let's see. I got a m squared minus 8m over m minus 3 plus 15 over m minus 3. So since I got a common denominator, I know it for sure at this point, the bottom's going to be a m minus 3. Now look on the top, I got an m squared, negative 8m, and a 15. None of those are like terms, so I'm just going to put them in order. M squared minus 8m plus 15. So now I need to see if this top will factor and maybe cancel with that bottom. So the top, we're going to factor, and that'll be over that m minus 3. So an m squared puts an m and an m. Last one's positive, so both of these will be negative like the middle. Factors of 15 that'll add to get 8 are 5 and 3. So y'all look, this one does simplify because these m minus 3's cancel, leaving me m minus 5. So you got to check and see if this thing factors to give you a factor that'll cancel with that denominator, okay? All right, y'all, then we got into synthetic division. So this one says use synthetic division to divide. So let's see what they're giving me. They're giving me a 4m to the third plus a 19m squared minus 55m plus 56, and we're dividing that by m plus 7. So the first thing I wrote out my coefficients. So let's see, I got an m3, an m2, an m, and a number. So nothing's missing. So let's write our numbers. I got a 4, a 19, a negative 55, and a positive 56. Now remember, I always squared that last section under the last number. Now, what I'm dividing by, my C, we call it, Remember, it's always opposite in sign than the factor you're dividing by. So since that's a positive 7, we're going to be dividing technically by a negative 7. All righty. So remember, the first number always came straight down. Then I'm going to multiply to get the second column. So 4 times negative 7 is a negative 28. Add them together, negative 28 and a positive 19 leave you a negative 9. Then we multiply again to get the next column. Negative 9 times negative 7 is a positive 63. 63 added to a negative 55 leaves me a positive 8. 8 times negative 7 is a negative 56. Those add to give me a 0. So remember, 0 was my remainder. So I don't have a remainder on this one. This here is my new quotient. Now remember, it starts 1 degree less than the original. So since that was a 4m cubed, this now becomes a 4m squared minus 9m plus 8. So you write them in descending order, starting 1 degree less than that original. And y'all, that's all we need for Math Lab is our 4m squared minus 9m plus 8. All right, 19 is one of them tricky ones. They want me to simplify. I got 1 over a plus 1 divided by 1 over a minus 1. So we got to get rid of these little fractions that's inside this big fraction. So what you're going to do, the least common multiple or least common denominator, well, there's only one thing in the bottom of these little fractions, and that's the a. So that's going to be my least common multiple. I'm going to take that a and multiply all 4 of them by the a. So you'll have a times 1 over a plus a times the 1. So both of them get multiplied by the a, and then both of these on the bottom are going to get multiplied by the a. All right, y'all, so let's see what happens. These a's cancel, giving me a 1 plus nothing cancels here. A times 1 is just an a. On bottom, these a's cancel, giving me a 1 minus a times 1 is an a. So I got one fraction now with a 1 plus a on top, 1 minus a on the bottom. Those do not simplify, so that would be your final answer. Okay, so remember, only got to multiply by whatever the denominator of these little fractions are, okay? But you got to multiply all 4 parts by that. All right, y'all, 20 says solve. 5 over x minus 4 over x is going to equal 6. So sort of like that problem I just did, number 19. I want to get rid of these little fractions here. So I'm going to multiply everybody by my least common multiple. And the only thing on the bottom is an x. So I'm going to multiply everybody by that x. Doing that, we'll get rid of the fractions. So we got x times 5 over x minus x times 4 over x will equal x times our 6. So notice what happens. Those x's cancel, making a 1. So 1 times 5 is 5 minus these x's cancel, making a 1. 1 times 4 is 4. But over here, you don't have a fraction. So multiply x times 6, and you're going to get a 6x. All right, so let's see. The left side, we can do that. 5 minus 4 is 1, equal to my 6x. And remember, we need that to be a 1x, so divide both sides by that 6. So I got a 1/6 over here. Those cancel, giving me my 1x. Cannot do anything to the 1/6, so final answer. All right, this one says simplify the radical. So I got a negative cube root of 729, x to the 4th, y to the 5th. All righty. So let me show you again on that calculator how to take a cube root. Now, no matter what, since I got a negative in front, my answer will be negative, okay? So let's find the cube root of that 729. So you ought to do cube roots. I hit math, and I go to option number 4, which has a cube root. Remember, we can only do the numbers, so I'm just wanting to find out what is the cube root of that 729. So I'll put my 729 into that. I'm going to hit enter, and I get a 9. So the cube root of 729 is a 9. So I brought down that negative, bring out that 9. Now, on these variables, for every 3 x's, they come out as 1x. Because remember, it takes 3 x's to come out since that's a cube root. So that means I'm going to have some leftovers here under this cube root still. So if I take out 3 of these x's, it takes 3 to come out as 1. So 3 of them will come out as 1x. That means you still got 1x left over under that radical. And do that with the y's. For every 3 y's, they come out as 1 y. So if you take out 3 y's, that comes out as a y. Well, if I take out 3 y's, that's going to leave me 2 y's under the radical. And y'all, that's the only thing you got to do to that and be done. So remember, for every 3 on the variables, since that's a cube root, it comes out as 1. If that was a square root, every 2 would come out as 1, okay? All right, number 22 just says simplify. I got a square root of 3x plus 4 square root of 48x plus 6 square root of 27x. So I cannot add these unless these radicals all look the same. So I'm going to try to simplify the radicals. Well, y'all, there's nothing I can do to that square root of 3x. So I'm going to bring that down as a square root of 3x. Then I got that 4. So 48, I can simplify. Because remember, to simplify them, I'm looking for those perfect squares like 4, 9, 16, and so on. So this one I could turn into, and I'm using this one to sort of guide me. If they're going to be able to add it, I got to have 3 x's under all these radicals somewhere. So 48 can make a 16 and a 3x. And then I'm going to do that with the last one. That'll be a 9 and a 3x. So let the one that you cannot simplify guide you. So bring down that square root of 3x. Right here, this 4 will get multiplied by the square root of 16, which is a 4. This 6 will get multiplied by the square root of 9, which is a 3. So let's multiply these two together before we finally add our final answer. So bring down that square root of 3x. 4 times 4 gives you 16 square root of 3x. 6 times 3 gives me 18 square root of 3x. So now, no matter what, you'll have some number in front of that square root of 3x. So remember, this is like a 1 plus 16 gives me 17. 17 plus 18 gives me 35 square root of 3x's. So again, a little bit tricky. We only had maybe 1 or 2 problems that had to do this kind of stuff, okay? So simplify the radicals first. Take care of the square roots that come out perfectly. Then remember, you got to multiply before you add, okay? All right, this one says solve the equation. So square root of 3x plus 4 equals 16. So on these ones, we had to start out by getting this radical by itself. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. So that'll give me my square root of 3x. Those cancel. And 16 minus 4 is 12. Now at this point, remember, to get rid of that radical, I got to square both sides. Since that's a square root, we got to square both sides. So that exponent cancels that radical, giving me a 3x. 12 squared, 12 times 12 is 144. All right, now to make that a 1x, divide both sides by 3. Well, that cancels, giving me my 1x. And y'all, let's see, 144 divided by 3 gives me what? A 48. So final answer, x is 48. So get the radical by itself, square both sides, and then divide if you got a number in front of that variable. All right, this one says write in standard form. Now what they mean is A plus BI form, okay? And this is multiplying. I got an 8 plus 3i times 2 minus 2i. Now remember, you can punch this perfectly on the calculator. So I'll do it both ways. So let me show you on the calculator. On the calculators, I got parentheses above the 8 and the 9. So parentheses 8 plus 3. Remember, to make the I, you hit the second decimal, close parentheses. Open up the next parentheses, 2 minus 2i, which is the second decimal. All right, close in parentheses. So when I'm done doing this by hand, I should get 22 minus 10i. All right, now remember, when you're multiplying on these, if you get an I squared, remember, I squared has to be turned into a -1. All right, y'all, here we go. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times -2i is a negative 16i. In the middle, 3i times 2 is a positive 6i. And then that 3i times -2i is a -6. I squared. So on the next step, I'm going to add like terms in the middle, and I'm going to turn that I squared into a -1. So bring down this 16. -16i plus 6i is a -10i. And then that -6 times that -1 becomes a +6. So the I squared's only purpose in life is to change the sign of the number in front of it. So that 6 went from being negative to positive, which means now these numbers will add together. So the 16 and the 6 give me 22 minus my 10i. So same thing we got on the calculator, doing it by hand, okay? And the trick is just remember the I squared has to be a -1. All right, y'all. Let me wrap my camera back up. So number 25. Solve the equation. And then if it's got complex solutions, write them in standard form. So that's the a plus bi, okay? So x squared minus 4x plus 40 equals 0. So this one, we're going to use our quadratic formula. And I'm going to write that down real quick. So -b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the first thing I needed was a 0 on the right side and this left side in descending order. So now I can get my numbers. A is 1. B will be the -4. C will be the +40. So let's plug these numbers in for the letters over here. So I'm going to get x equals a -b, which is -4. So if your b is negative, that negative will turn it positive. If your b was positive, that negative would turn it negative. All right, b squared is a -4 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is 40. All of that over 2 times my a, which is 1. So that -4 makes that a +4, plus or minus. All right, let's play with this radical because most of our work will be under this radical. A -4 times -4 makes that a +16. Now over here, all three of these are being multiplied. I got one negative, so it will stay negative. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 40 is 160. All of that over 2 times 1, which is 2. All right, so we still got a little more under here. 16 minus 160 is a -144 all over my 2. All right, so bring down the 4 plus or minus square root of -144. Remember, since it's negative, we're going to break that out as a -1. So I'm going to have a 144 and my -1. Square root of 144 is 12. Remember, I can't take square root of -1, but I got to replace that with my I, which means this will now be an imaginary answer. So replace the square root of -144 with 12i. All of that over 2. And on your last step, take both the top parts, divide by that 2. So 4 divided by 2 gives me 2 plus or minus 12i divided by 2 is a 6i. So everything on one side equal to 0, then find your 3 numbers, plug into your formula, And then it's just a matter of simplifying it. And y'all's will have a perfect square here when you get to that radical, okay? So you won't have to simplify it into like a number and a radical. It'll come out as a perfect square. Y'all, those are the 25 questions you want to know for that final exam. Okay, so I will get this video sent out to y'all so that you know which 25 to focus on, okay? Now, you got a study guide in there that's got like, woo, it had like 59 questions on it, but they did a lot of repeats on it. So if you want to practice on that, you can, or focus on those 25 I just gave you. Your final exam will be like those ones, okay? All right, so here's the thing. All y'all got to do is this final exam. It is due Thursday night, which is what? August the 3rd at midnight. So I will be back on here Thursday night for y'all if you need any last second help on that final exam studying for it, okay? All right, y'all. So any questions? All right, so I'm going to stop recording our chat.